Again, welcome everybody to our Impact Tuesday for this month. So I would like to welcome our partner Sunway iLab and our panelists for today, Faisal and also Aaron. So this is our second sessions that we have with our partner Sunway iLab to promote and create awareness on their new initiative called the Net Zero Lab. But before we continue, before I call in Renuka for a quick introduction, can I invite everybody to open your camera so that we can take a quick photo. Carol, can you help us with the question? Hello, hi Sandeep. Long time no see. Okay. I think let me do the counting. 1, 2, 3, and smile and freeze for a few seconds. So 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. Carol say. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So now I would like to invite Ms. Renuka Sena, CEO and co-founder of Proficeo, to share with us more about what is Impact Tuesday, and then and also share with us why we are here today. Over to you, Renu.
Thank you, Afzal, and thank you everyone for joining. I know it's lunchtime, so feel free to turn off your cameras and have your lunch while listening to us. We, as in Proficeo, started doing our Impact Tuesday sessions last year in 2022. And this is more of a personal agenda that we have for the company as well, myself, to raise more awareness about what's happening in the world in the impact space, whether it's technology related or climate related or even social impact. We started last year with a lot of generic sessions, more talking about investment, why ESG is important to SMEs, etc. But this year, we are a little bit more focused as we have a couple of partners that we're working with, one of which is Sunway iLabs. And I was delighted when Dr. Melissa from Sunway iLabs contacted us to partner with us for Impact Tuesday sessions, because Sunway has launched their Net Zero Lab initiative with certain agenda to actually achieve their net zero targets by working with technology startups. And that's very interesting because technology startups basically are changing the world as far as I can see. In doing these sessions, we had a session previously, so you can go to our social media. I apologize for the noise in the background. There's some renovation going on, if you can hear it. But you can hear about more about Sunway iLabs and their Net Zero Labs, and any startups in the room. It's particularly interesting for you guys to check them out because they are actively looking at startups that they can work with to help them achieve their net zero targets. So today I'd like to welcome Faisal, the Chief Strategy Officer from Sunway Group, as well as Aaron Patel, Founder and Managing Director of iHandal Energy Solutions, to this discourse today to talk about energy and both renewable energy as well as energy efficiency technologies. Maybe to start off with, I'll give the floor to Faisal and Aaron to introduce yourselves a little bit. Maybe Faisal, you can start with telling us a little bit more about the Sunway Net Zero Labs and the purpose, the different areas that you're looking at for Sunway to achieve your objectives.
Sure thing. Thanks, Renuka. I think you had Dr. Melissa Fu on the show in March, right? I think she probably could give you a much better, broader sort of like view on it. But for the benefit of our audience, basically we've got this Net Zero Lab, and basically it's to help Sunway achieve our net zero target by 2050, halve our emissions by 2030. And very broadly, what we are looking for are solutions related to the circular economy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, food security, and sustainable cities. looking at up to about $1 million in terms of funding opportunities. And we haven't put in any funds into any particular startup just yet. We're evaluating a few potential investments. I just caught up with Dr. Melissa, about an hour ago, I think. So that's basically where we're at. And if you've got a great idea, please do come and apply to our Net Zero Lab.
Thank you, Faisal.
Yeah.
Aaron, may I invite you to just do a quick introduction? And I know you have some slides, which I'm looking forward to hearing actually, because I think you're doing some wonderful things in the energy sector.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction, Renu. So I'm Aaron, right? I'm founder of iHandal. What we do is a little unique. So the energy efficiency space is quite fragmented, quite large, right? Everybody has a solution for something, right? And they're all applicable, right? To hit this net zero target and ambition that we have, right? What we have chosen, right, and specialize in is actually thermal energy efficiency, which is, really 2/3 of final energy use, right? In most of the buildings and industries that that are applicable with our solutions. So I'll just share a bit more, just because it's something that I'm surprised that many people haven't heard about. So I think when I had the chat with Renu, she thought it'd be a good experience just for everyone, just to have a better understanding of the opportunities in this space. So at iHandal, right, what we do is to specialize in in recycling wasted energy, right? So the first thing I wanted to touch on is everybody always thinks that heat has to be something that it's hot. When you go outside, you feel the heat around you, right? It has to be even hotter. When you're driving around a highway, you see all the exhausts, from buildings and factories that are coming out. Those are basically all heat that are untapped because basically people have not figured out a way to prioritize that just because technologies didn't make it commercially viable. What we do is we tap into heat sources, as simple as basement car parks, exhausts that you see outside, right? And we actually find ways to recycle and repurpose that energy back into buildings and processes to then reduce the actual energy use, right? By recovering what they already generate. In terms of high level of what we've delivered, we have consistently delivered savings of as much as 75% of energy use towards heating and cooling. And more importantly today, right, a lot of customers don't only work with us for financial energy savings, right, which was really the core when we started this 15 years ago. But what we've seen in the last 3 to 5 years, right, a lot of people have kind of focused especially more towards achieving their net zero goals. And this being such significant savings towards achieving their target has been a priority for a lot of the multinationals that we have started working with in the past few years. So just in terms of approach, right, I think this was linked to some questions. How we provide our model is a bit unique in that although we also have our own proprietary technology, we're not just a manufacturer that develops the technology. Just because the market is so fragmented, we had to build the entire business model in a kind of, called an ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, this turnkey business model to deliver that solution to clients, because clients did not know where the solution was or what they actually needed. They just knew it was a problem. And actually to some clients, that problem has become so ingrained, they just think it's just status quo, right? It's not a problem to them anymore. So most people have typically one kind of energy bill as the total energy. They don't know how to go into granular detail. We do that all as a service. And the end goal is to actually design a customized solution around our proprietary tech and actually guarantee the outcome. So we also guarantee and finance retrofits for our solutions. So more than 80% of the equipment that we have put out in the market today, so about 500 machines out there across about 200 to 300 sites in the region, are actually owned by us. And we are financed it purely through savings. So that cut through a lot of the doubts, I think, that was sowed over the years by many different companies that have gone out with technology, whether they work or not is a separate matter. We had to kind of carve out our own pathway, and we did that through this guarantees and financing model, right, that actually bridge all those gaps, right? So just in terms of that's a very straightforward guarantee. In terms of markets that we have worked with, I know we'll touch on this later, right? We do work across a wide segment across about 15 countries to date, whether it's in the hospitality, healthcare, or manufacturing. There's a lot of white space there, just because I did check with some clients, not everyone's comfortable with displaying their names. But essentially, we work with a lot of the top manufacturers in latex, food manufacturing, pharma, semicon, all of this around heating and cooling, right? So that's just a quick introduction of what we do.
Thank you, Aaron. So for everyone who doesn't know, when I had my chat with Aaron before today's session, and I asked him how he actually started this and when he started, I was I was in awe of when he actually started this, and I think you're better off hearing it from him rather than me. Aaron, do you want to maybe tell everyone how you actually started this and when? When I say when, I mean the age in which you started thermodynamics.
Sure, I missed out on that just because it's been so long ago. So I started this is my high school project, my final year high school project. So I've been doing this since I'm 31 now, so about 16 years now. So I was 15 when I was put into this industry due to unfortunate circumstances, but it worked out, right? Worked out in the end. I was put into a solar thermal trading business that my dad used to do, the solar water heaters you had at home. And it became apparent I couldn't go any further in my studies. So I took every opportunity that I had in high school to find use cases for heating and cooling and what was the new tech out there. And I wanted to go beyond trading just because I had a more engineering mind, like to put things together. So this is where I explored the technology that we have today, more of what was already what existed back then. And we connected with a manufacturer who said they could do it for us. And we connected with a pilot client, which was Team Hotels. So Mark, there was the Apprentice Asia judge, even way before Apprentice Asia. He was very supportive of entrepreneurs. I met him, I think when I was 16. I presented the idea to him, and I said I had this cool idea, and I needed someone to kind of to lead it, right, to help me to do it. He says, great. He was still in awe that a 16-year-old was presenting to him. I still remember because the second time I went to his office, that was the only point he remembered from presentation. Listen, he didn't remember he just remembered that I was 16, right? And he gave us a business model. He said, I can't pay you until it works. So put it in. If it works, I'll buy it from you. And that kind of gave us a business model from there to that we still maintain today.
That's awesome. My son doesn't like you very much because he's 14 and now he's got a tremendous pressure to actually do something in high school. Maybe I can jump to Faisal now, since this is something we're talking about with regards to net zero. And maybe Faisal, you could share with the audience here today, what are some of the efforts that Sunway has started in utilizing renewable energy as well as energy efficiency type of solutions across the Sunway group, to give everyone a better understanding of the thinking as well as the direction that Sunway is looking at.
Thanks for that. So I think that the first step in this is really quantification, right? Trying to understand what exactly our footprint is. And Jacqueline Wong, who's our head of sustainability, she's been charting our 2050 roadmap, how we're going to get there. If you do a search on Sunway Sustainability Report online, you can sort of take a look at, where we're at with that. I mean, just in terms of energy usage, we consume about 500,000 megawatt hours per year, and we spend on TNB alone. Our energy bills were 144 million annually with TNB, right? So if you take a look at, how she's done it, basically we've got our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We emit about 186,000 tons of CO2, and we've sort of like offset about maybe 8,000 tons. So there's a lot of work left to get done, right? And in terms of projects so far, we've got 2 large-scale solar farms, one in Gopeng, Perak, another one in Kapar, Selangor. Altogether, you're looking at about maybe 100 megawatts. And we're among the lowest. If there's a tender cost, we're looking at just below 18 cents per kilowatt hour. We've also got about 18 rooftop solar projects, 18,000 sort of kilowatt peak. We've done district cooling. I think I mentioned that in our pre-chat before. That's a centralized chiller that works at night to chill water and release during the day to cool buildings. It saves about 30% of energy costs compared to decentralized air conditioning. We've got about 70 EV charging points throughout Sunway properties to sort of address range anxiety among EV vehicle owners. I think we've got another 100 plus coming up in the next few years at different properties that will be putting those things in. Very recently, we signed an MOU with TNB, very wide-ranging sort of ESG initiatives. We're getting training from them. We're collaborating on charge points. We're doing things on district cooling as well. It's a very, I won't go through every single thing that doing in there, but it was quite an exciting development, and we're continuously sort of like working on the different points of the MOU together with them. We also signed one with Gentari and EV Connection recently to sort of like get more charging points in. We're working on a few other things right now, very exciting things, but I can't talk about them just yet until we sort of like get some good traction with it. But that's very broadly our approach. So like quantify the problem, figure out sort of how much we are emitting, and then sort of like work towards attacking that. And certainly what Aaron just mentioned would be very, very interesting for Sunway, right? Because if Aaron can reduce our electricity bill by 10%, that's already 12-14 million ringgit in our pockets right there. So would love to carry that conversation forward with Aaron afterwards. But that's very broadly our approach.
Just a little bit more on that, Faisal, because Sunway, at the end of the day, is a conglomerate. There's so many different aspects to the business that you're looking at. And is there a particular focus, just for the entrepreneurs that are here today that looking at, applying for Net Zero Labs, say, for example, is there a particular focus more into energy management, or is it more into solar and renewable energy sources? Where's the focus, you would say, if you had to pick one?
Oh gosh, I think on the construction side of things, we're probably very focused on solar at the moment, just because of the two projects that we've got. But apart from that, I think for work at Net Zero Labs, I think they're also thinking about things like food security. We've got our X farms right in there doing stuff like that. I think we're very open to different aspects of it, and we want to attack the problem in sort of a multi-pronged approach. And if people have interesting new ideas, we're not going to limit ourselves and say, oh, just because we've got to focus on this, we're not going to sort of like entertain anything else. But maybe I can sort of share. I mean, some people are approaching us about nuclear as well, and sort of like taking a look at that. There's some interesting things that maybe I'll talk about later on in the chat. But yeah, I don't think we are limiting ourselves to any particular area. We're very, very open to looking at different things.
Okay, that's great to know. Over to Aaron. I noticed just now in your slides, basically you talk about various industries like the manufacturing sector, hospitality, etc. And you started with Tune. Maybe we can share a little bit about some of the energy challenges that you've seen in, say, for example, the hospitality sector, and what some of these challenges may be in terms of getting your clients to understand where some of these wasted energy sources may be. I think apart from the examples you gave just now, where you see factories and the fumes going up, I think it would be useful for people to understand wasted energy and where these sources may be in the various sectors, and what iHandal is doing to actually harness that energy.
Sure. Yeah, before I go into the specific, because we could be here for the whole day, right? Because there's so many use cases that we have. I know we're doing harnessing heat. Just talk about challenges, right? So coming out of COVID, hospitality, it's still tough now for a lot of our clients. And the biggest thing they realized during COVID was energy use is not proportionate to actual occupancy or business demand. And I think this is something that Faisal will chip in as well, right? when you have malls, you have air-conditioned spaces, offices, whether you have one tenant occupying the space, you have 10% of the mall occupied, you have 10% of the rooms occupied, it's not linear, right? And that is where they're struggling now for the industry that we're in previously. So again, hospitality is where we have come from. About, I guess, 80-90% of the addressable hotels in Malaysia already adopt our solutions. So right now, our focus is mainly industrial in Malaysia, manufacturing, and commercial for rest of APAC that we're working on. So in terms of where we've recovered heat, besides what is the obvious heat sources that we've seen, right? Car park is one, right? That is still our go-to for a lot of our clients, just because, especially integrated development, car parks tend to still be the hottest places and that they have. Other areas would be any kind of cooling process, right? So the foundation of our solution has always been a heat movement, right? And the first thing that when we present our solutions, people always say, my problem is not heating, it's cooling, right? My electricity bill is for air conditioning, not for heating, right? Help me there, right? So technically, engineering-wise, cooling does not exist in scientific technical terms, right? Cooling is a process of removal of heat. So right now, where we're at, with the aircon, that although it feels like it's blowing out cold air, right? What's happening is warm air was actually sucked in, heat was removed, and the byproduct is cold air. So how your aircon works is taking heat out and it throws it to the outdoor, which is why, when you've ever walked past a shop lot or something, you feel that blast of warm air, that is actually heat being moved out. So the bottleneck for efficiency of any cooling system is how well it can reject heat. So on a hotter day, that's why aircon doesn't work as well. It has to work harder, right? And efficiency is lower. So what we're doing here for a lot of our clients is with this heat, if we can actually find ways to direct it where it's of use, right? For example, in a hotel, hot water for kitchen, washing. Industrial, the use is endless, right? In their processes, humidity control to make dry air. We do milk powder, food. There's so many different uses of heat, right? Their cooling now becomes significantly more efficient because we've found uses for that heat. And that is what we kind of bridge. So wherever there's actual heat being, wherever there's cooling, there's an opportunity for us to recover heat, right? Whether it's space cooling, besides the obvious ovens and exhaust, right? All these places that, even in the room that you're in, there's heat that we can recover. It is where we've even miniaturized it for homes, right? In your home, the hottest area is at the roof, right? Which is why when you walk upstairs on a hot day, all the heat is there. We have solutions that can recover that heat event to then produce hot water and cool down our home. It's just that we haven't had the scale to roll it out. So, again, I have many use cases across industries, but in hotels, most often is actually the heat rejection from the cooling systems, which is where we connect the heat, our systems to generate hot water, right? For showering, kitchen, laundry, right? As the main uses of the end use of our equipment.
Thank you, Aaron. That was very interesting. I want to move a little bit more in terms of, now our national agenda, as well as, many corporates, MNCs, GLCs, PLCs, the buzz, 3 letters that seem to be used a lot now is ESG, and of course, carbon emissions and reducing GHG. So, we have national aspirations, the likes of corporates like Sunways have got corporate aspirations. I suppose a question to both of you, and maybe I'll start with Aaron, is for these, lofty aspirations that we have to actually reduce, GHG emission to 45% by 2030, which is a national aspiration. Do you think it's actually possible or achievable? And do we have, in your mind, do we have the right policies and incentives in place to actually achieve this via energy efficiency?
Sure, I'll just touch on that quickly. So whether it's achievable, technically it is, right? There is technology available, right? There is financing, all of that is available, right? I think the big challenge that we have seen, right, working with, it's always been a top-down for a lot of our customers, right? So the CEO reads something and says, okay, I want to go net zero, right? Everybody else now has to figure out, right, how to get it done. The challenge is education, right? And also that people believe it's an easy fix just because from a policy point of view. And this is where they have the whole REEE debate, which I encourage her to flies out with Sunway. They're looking at it in totality, right? Just from a policy and education point of view, solar has been the main driver, right, for most of these companies to date, until they evaluate how much they offset from their actual emissions and their actual use. And most of the clients that we have had, for hotels, it's in single digit, right? It's insignificant. And for manufacturing, for the heavy users, this is less than 10% of final energy use, right? The problem is the policies have done it in a way where you can actually see that it is energy efficiency is not part of the conversation. I mean, from my point of view, and you can see it very clearly in incentives given, right? There's one incentive that's kind of a go-to for the industry. It's called the MIDAS Green GTGA. It's basically an ITA, right, for green. They just lumped it all together. And we only recently found out, right, you either can claim it once for RE or EE, which then, it becomes a very clear thing, right, for customers. When they do one, they don't do the other. And it's clearly given already from a policy point of view because the incentive is done that way. And that whole re-educating customers where, energy efficiency is step one, right? You become as efficient as possible, and then you offset what you have, right, with RE, but that's usually a step 1, step 2. And that is a whole global push, right, with everyone. You look at NEA, right, from the global reporting, it's always one piece of the puzzle because everybody thinks there's an easy, no compromise solution. I magically switch my energy source from one to another. I don't change my lifestyle. I don't change anything about the building. I don't change my process. Everything will be great, right? We don't have to do anything, right? But there's so much blatant wastage, right, in energy that if we continue wasting the energy and just focus on trying to substituting it, we'll never get there, right? So it's something that just requires a whole lot of education. And I think if we can get that right, we should be able to do it from a global point of view. Malaysia, it's its own separate thing, right? But globally, it's possible. Malaysia, of course, has a couple of things to do in policy before we can get there.
Switching over to Faisal, same question, but now from the corporate perspective, right? These policies and what Aaron just mentioned, is Sunway yourselves finding that basically these policies are not actually helping move the needle forward, and some of the challenges that perhaps you have seen or Sunway has seen in terms of how you can actually scale up whatever you're doing now, whether it's in the renewable energy side or in energy efficiency. Do you see as number one, do you see yourselves number one as being able to achieve the targets based on the step 1, step 2, step 3 that you mentioned just now? But can policies help, and are they an impediment?
Yeah, when you take a very big step back at this, I think what strikes a lot of us is basically the massive investment needed, right? You're talking about hundreds of billions of ringgit in generation, transmission, storage. We're sort of like looking at that as an opportunity as well, right? In terms of what needs to get done. I think right now the current grid can probably take about 8,000 megawatts of solar capacity. And beyond that, you're going to have some serious intermittency sort of like issues, right? So again, there's going to be quite a bit of thinking that needs to go in. As Aaron said, it's not that you just plonk down a few solar sort of like generation plants and then it magically sort of like fixes the whole thing. Not quite, because solar works during the day. I think in Malaysia we get about 3.5 hours of the usable sunlight, in that. But beyond that, we've got to think about, at night, where's the power going to come from? And it can't be, solar unless you have some serious storage capability as well put in there. Beyond solar, I have it from good authority that the Rajang River can probably take another 20 bakuns. That will be an insane amount of power coming from that, So again, it depends really how you want to frame it as well, I feel. If you sort of like talk in terms of saving the planet and things, it might not resonate so much with people, but businesses and people are generally very cost conscious. So if you come in and you say that, well, I can reduce your electricity bill by 10%, 20%, I think that will immediately resonate with a lot of companies. And I think in the next, past few weeks and next few months, I think people are going to see massive sort of like aircon bills because it's been really, really hot. So I think people really start to notice that, hey, number one, it is becoming really, really hot. My cooling, sort of heat removal, as Aaron put it, bill is going very, very high. And the government has already said that we're going to remove subsidies, right? And that could be one of the key sort of, policy moves that will really start to push people towards, looking at renewables in a serious way. And, also think about our petrol price. That is heavily subsidized by the government. In nearly every other country, it makes sense to use the EV, but in Malaysia it's skewed because of those subsidies. But that becomes almost like a political issue, right? Because if you think of it in terms of inflation and whatnot, it becomes a bit more difficult. So I have some sympathy for the government as well. They're trying to sort of like push in that direction. But someone told me that if you were to remove the subsidies that we've got right now, Malaysian inflation is closer to 11%. And I don't think they're wrong, So these things are costing the government quite a fair bit. Now, specifically on maybe large scale solar, I think auction sizes are too low. on average, we've had about 300 megawatts per year since 2016. That should be, closer to about 2,000 megawatts per year, I'd say. And in terms of, participation criteria as well, I think the maximum that any individual player can do is about 50 megawatts, and that really disadvantages sort of like big players to really come in a very big way and do those things. So there's a few other things in terms of deregulating things, but I won't get into that. But it's a very interesting topic, and some very intelligent people have looked at it before, and it's not an easy job. So I don't envy Danny Rashdan over at the at Suruhanjaya Tenaga. He got quite a big plate to sort of like sort out basically in the next few years. So yeah, that's a little taster.
Yeah, thanks, Faisal. And thanks also for reminding us about our skyrocketing personal energy bills.
It's coming.
Air
It's
conditioning.
coming.
Yeah. And worse still, as you mentioned, the removal of subsidies. So Aaron, time to come to the consumer side and help us reduce our energies at home as well. Moving over, I think a quick question that I had also, I guess, is in our attempt to reduce GHG, get to net zero, and this energy conversation, in your minds, and try to be, neutral, in your minds, is it more important to focus on energy efficiency as opposed to renewable energy? Because I know, renewable energy, to a certain extent, it's supposed to be limitless, right? Whether if the sun shines, basically you can try and harness it, and then you've got, of course, water and wind. In different countries, different things apply. But just taking a leaf out of what Aaron mentioned just now about another thing that seems to be limitless also is the constant heat that is being generated by all of these different industries and practically everyone in tropical countries using the air conditioning. So which do you think is more important that corporates or even our government should be focusing on? Is it new energy sources or is it energy efficiency? And which will get us to the net zero quicker? Aaron?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, you said remain neutral, right? I think it's clearly where you need both, right? So in all the studies that you've done, there's no either or. Neither one gets us to net zero individually, right? The one that has, so all the things that Faisal mentioned, the investment and all these kind of things, RE is significantly larger to invest in. It's fast. I mean, it takes a whole lot longer for paybacks. It's going to move a lot slower, right? So in terms of priority, right? If you talk about today, energy efficiency moves the needle right away, immediately today, and it helps us get to a point where renewable energy can offset a larger portion of demand. So talk about prioritizing, right? Energy efficiency is usually step one, RE is step two, but it's not something that you can focus on one or the other, right? It's something that has to be a comprehensive policy on both, which is what we've seen in other countries. Our leading markets are in a lot of the countries, for example, like the US, right? Where their grid is actually already decarbonized. In New York, right? Where we're quite active in now, right? Thankfully, it's a given requirement by the state government. They subsidize, even in Australia and Victoria, they subsidize almost 90% of the cost of retrofit because they want people to move to the grid to use electricity, which is almost carbon neutral because their grid is already clean, right? So they've done the RE and now they're doing the EE. So either or works, but they know that one doesn't work without the other. So it's just a matter of how policy is done. And we've seen it work quite successfully in other countries. For example, in Malaysia, you've gone to a restaurant, you see the ABC, the hygiene standard. In buildings in New York, you have that for energy efficiency. So we have a building A for hygiene, but F for energy efficiency. And that's at the plus at the front of the building, right? And that is the level of importance they've put on energy efficiency. And it's just a matter of policy where how do they emphasize both equally to get us there?
Thank you, Aaron, for trying to be neutral. But I think it makes a lot of sense because if we're talking about which one we should prioritize, especially because of the high cost of investment, perhaps, that is sound advice. Faisal, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a two-pronged approach, but I'll just throw into the mix. I've always found it incredibly bizarre that we don't have ceiling fans in offices. And when I was renovating my office in, I think it was 2016, I made sure that we put in ceiling fans, open the windows ever so slightly on cooler days, and use the fan. And my word, my energy bill at the office is actually lower than it is at home. Bizarrely enough, when home I get residential rates, and at the office I get commercial rates. So it's I think maybe it is a bit of a status symbol. Before this, energy costs were very, very low. And it's sort of like been baked into everybody's heads that, oh, if it's an office, we must be running at 16 degrees Celsius, wearing jackets indoors and whatnot in a tropical country. And to me, it's always seemed a little bit bizarre that, so when you're studying abroad and you go to a very cold country, when it's cold, you don't really notice it, but when it's cold and windy, then you really feel it, right? So applying that very same principle to the office, if you have, sort of like an aircon on maybe like 26 Celsius and pair it up with a ceiling fan, I think that would be, far cheaper than running things at 22 or 18 Celsius all day long. And so there's going to be little things like this, and whether people are willing to make those adjustments and sort of open windows and things. If you look at some of the, older houses in Malaysia, they had that principle. They had a hole at the bottom and then a hole at the top of the wall. And the idea was, sort of like heat can sort of escape and go out, and one's the inlet and one's the outlet. So it's nothing new. It's just basic science. And yet when it comes to, certain types of buildings, we forget about that. And, Sunway, we've got some, pardon my language, but they're literally called big ass fans. In some of our malls and things like that, running above, and it does make a very, very noticeable difference. And I just hope that more companies look at it, and I think they'll probably be looking at it now, since Anwar is taking away all the subsidies for a lot of the larger companies, and start looking at the energy costs, and that's one sort of very quick win. You're not talking about like revolutionary technology that's going to be like 5-10 years of R&D kind of thing. It's literally stuff you can go to, a hardware shop and buy like right now, and it'll make it'll move the needle, as it were, right? So, I've been going on and on about it at Sunway, but slowly, I'm still new, but we'll see how it goes.
So, also, just on that point, now with all of our skyrocketing bills, there's also a lot of these hacks on TikTok and, various things like that. And the other day, someone actually mentioned to me that, speaking about energy efficiency, just changing the temperature of your aircon from 16 degrees to say 22, 23 degrees actually can make a big difference, to your energy bills. And another hack that I saw the other day on TikTok was basically just having a pail of water in a room when you have your aircon or your fan working. So I don't know whether this is true. I'm looking at Aaron now because he's the scientist, but apparently it reduces the temperature of the room just by having a bucket of water. Is that a hack, or is that, should I throw that one out the window?
I haven't tried it personally, so I can't say anything. But the engineering principle works. It's basically thermal storage, right? So the water is cooler, right? And they provide some kind of a heat sink to your room, so it does work. I mean, so just like what Faisal mentioned, all the stuff that that needs to be done, it's pretty obvious. You don't need something that's R&D. If you've gone to your home, for example, the gaps under your door, how many people pay attention to that? You go to a restaurant that's air conditioned, the shop lots, right? When you open the door, how much cold air goes in and out, right? That is exchanged. When you go on the rooftops of buildings, this is something that you can't access. But when you walk behind shop lots, you see the kitchen exhaust sucking up cold air, right, from a restaurant, right, or a shopping mall for that case. A lot of this stuff seems obvious, right? Why are we wasting the energy? It doesn't seem to have the motivation, So hopefully you have the carrot and stick. So I guess we're going for the stick approach now with the removal of subsidies, right? Which is what is motivating people now from the painful bills. For a big part of the market, we saw the industrials hit hard by the ICPT change, the increase of 20 cents in January this year, where energy bills went up. And I'm sure for Sunway, it was a massive increase, like it was 40 to 50% of energy bills. It went up, right, for industrial, but commercial, retail, all that haven't, even domestic, residential has not felt it yet. So there's going to be a big motivation, but like I said, it's something that all of us can be involved in. You don't need hacks, right? It's just about just having a different mindset. Where can I cut wastage, right? And it will surprise you. You can cut 20, 30% overnight just from making changes in habits and cutting wastage without changing anything, right? Yeah.
Definitely a lot of education required. It's already 2:18 and I've taken up a lot of time asking all of my burning questions. If there's anyone in the audience now that has questions that you want to raise for the panelists, or even talk about Net Zero Labs, please do type your questions in the chat room. While you guys are doing that, I want to welcome Dr. Melissa from Sunway iLabs. Hi, Melissa, and thanks for joining us. So while everyone is thinking about what questions they may have about energy efficiency and things like this, I'm so glad you joined so that you can give us a kind of quick overview, or if you have slides that you want to show about Sunway Net Zero Labs, especially to the entrepreneurs here, about who should be reaching out and what it is you're doing in the sector.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Renuka, hi Aaron, hi Faisal. It's great to see all of you here to discuss about renewable energy. I think some people have been here from the last sharing session that we did on I think some time ago. So I will do a really quick sharing about Sunway's Net Zero Labs and what we really, I think this, as Faisal mentioned, is really part of that whole multi-pronged kind of like approach that Sunway Group is taking towards sustainability and achieving net zero. And one of them is really working with and looking for innovations and the best technologies that we can work with, either to invest in and co-develop and co-design that could be a part of the solutions and strategies that Sunway is looking for to net zero. I also saw Faisal and Aaron talking about maybe how we can also work with iHandal, so that's definitely something that we want to explore further. So if you saw a quick thumbs up I put there. So I think the easiest way will be if I share my slides. But it'll just be a quick one because I know that we've run through some of these at the last session as well, right? Basically, the Net Zero Lab is an innovation lab and a fund where we want to work with the startups and technology, innovations to help Sunway Group achieve their net zero goals. See if I can go to the next page. Yeah. So basically, I think what we've seen is that there is a huge opportunity for Malaysia to be the hub for sustainable solutions in the region. And this is because in our search for innovative technology that Sunway Group can use to achieve net zero goals, we realized that there are a lot of solutions out there. And of course, some have grown, some have scaled, but definitely not enough for us to achieve anywhere near to, that whole net zero roadmap that we'll share yet, right? And so there is still a significant funding that's needed to achieve that for Sunway, but also for the region. And I think what we really wanted to do is really leverage that whole network that we have. I think Sunway Group has a lot of different access to IP technologies through Sunway Education Group and our partnerships with the global universities, to not just explore solutions here or technologies here, but to see how we can look globally for solutions all over the world, and maybe work with them, like invest or set up a joint venture with some of these technology partners and solutions to grow and scale their options in Malaysia and in the region. Right? So I think basically we really think that it's not just the IP and technologies globally, but also from Malaysia that could be exported to the region, and then globally for us to develop it, to actually make it a lot suitable for our climate here. Just a little story, when I was, we were looking for solutions in the UK And we were there in December, which was one of the, I think it was the coldest day of the year, right? So a lot of the solutions, energy solutions, really talk a lot about heating and, and I was, and especially because it was so cold there, it was, something that they talked a lot about heating and temperature regulation. And then on the flight back, when I landed in Malaysia in December, and then now that we're having the heat wave, I realized that, a lot of these technologies, I mean, it really requires adaptation to the local climate as well, right? And this is something that we've noticed with some of the startups that we're looking at and bringing in, that there is a lot that they need to understand about the Malaysian corporate market and so on, and what's the appetite for innovations and sustainability. So something that we can work with them in the context of the Net Zero Lab. The Net Zero Lab will actually be focusing on 4 areas. Renewable and efficient energy is one of them, and of course, I think hopefully we'll get to reach out to more of the startups and innovations in this community, focusing on food security, sustainable cities, and the circular economy. So I think, this one we've covered, of course, that there's, if we do nothing, right? If from today all of us do nothing, we're actually on the brink of, what could be a climate catastrophe, right? And rising sea levels, heat waves, temperatures, global temperature increase, and so on. So these are some of the areas that we are hoping, that to invest in, to find solutions for these. And potentially prevent disaster, a climate catastrophe. Definitely Malaysia has committed to 45% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2030. And globally, there has been, more and more interest in sustainable investing, and hopefully this trend will continue to grow. Yeah. As you can see, when we looked at some of the research numbers, right, they're just trillions needed and sometimes billions per year needed to actually achieve the sustainable development goals, right? So what we are investing is probably just a small drop in these billions and trillions numbers, but I guess we all need to start somewhere, and we also want, everyone in the ecosystem here to understand just how important this is, and really put in the support ecosystem, the investment ecosystem, as well as the innovation ecosystem, kind of working together to create the solutions needed, right, for the sustainable development goals, but also to achieve the net zero goal. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what is the Net Zero Lab? I think the Net Zero Lab will really focus on Sunway's links in the ecosystem with different ecosystem partners, to then feed, I think, a lot of the deals or startups into this Net Zero Lab. I mean, we work with like local and overseas ecosystems, universities, as well as VC funds, where we do cross-border programs. So the Net Zero Lab was actually soft launched in March this year. And that was through one of our cross-border programs with the Department of Business and Trade in the UK. So through that, about 10 startups pitched in the end of March for entry into the Net Zero Lab, of which we are now connecting them to our business units to scope and see whether there is any suitability for a pilot. So if you notice at the top of this slide, that's the cross-border program entry into the Net Zero Lab. We're also working with other organizations from Singapore and Japan and so on to kind of do that cross-border program into Malaysia. However, we really thank Proficeo as well to be one of our local, ecosystem partners that we're working with, because we also welcome direct applications into the Net Zero Lab, and you're free to reach out to us. The entry into the lab is on a rolling basis, and basically it's a one-year program where upon entry, we will then, work with you on pilot projects and also connect you to different other workshops, fundraising, and everything partners. The investment decision for the Net Zero Lab can occur at the start of, the 1 year. So some of the international partners, if they were to move to Malaysia, maybe the investment decision happens earlier. However, if your startup is not currently fundraising, you can actually, run the pilot first with us, and then actually then, we during or after the pilot, that could be when we decide to make the investment decision based on, the results or the synergies between Sunway and the pilot and the startup. And of course, this is some of our other follow on, like where we after the net zero lab, we look to see how we can scale you, to other corporates in Malaysia. Of course, there is opportunities for follow on funding and other pilots with other corporates as well. Yeah. So it's a little bit longer than 5, I guess, minutes, but I wanted to make sure that I explained the key points. Happy to take any questions if you have. Otherwise, you can email me or connect with us on our social media and website.
Thank you, Melissa. I think the entrepreneurs that are here probably be very excited and wanting to get in touch quickly. We do have a couple of questions. Aaron, there's one question from Sandeep, and that's probably more a business related question, which I can connect the two of you after to talk about. So just quickly, Aaron, Sandeep is in the hospitality industry, and so I can understand why he wants to chat with you. So the next question here is, something I'm glad Aiza brought up, because there is a lot of conversation about EVs, right? And as she says, basically Toyota believes that the world is not really fully ready for EV because the electricity to charge it still uses carbon in most parts of the world. And, there's not enough EV charging stations across, I suppose, where consumers may be. And I'm not really sure which one of you would like to take that question or perhaps offer an opinion. But there is a lot of push. There seems to be anyway, a lot of push towards EV and sale of EV vehicles, whether they are cars, motorbikes, bicycles, etc. And I'm not sure whether you have an opinion as to are EVs actually helping, or is it more of a long-term vision that we will see, the benefits of it come later. Either one of you want to take it, or Melissa? I understand there's no real experts here, but just anyone want to express an opinion? Faisal?
Yeah, I think, on a very basic level, we need to clean up our grid, because if you're pumping so-called dirty energy into those EVs, sure, the EV itself doesn't have any emissions, but you got to think about the manufacturing process of the vehicle itself, the components that are being used, the batteries and whatnot, and then you got to think about the power itself, right? That's pumped to the vehicle. So I'm in favor of looking at it a bit more holistically rather than seeing it as a panacea. Sorry about that, guys. It's one of those days.
Bless you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's just my view. Yeah.
Aaron, would you like to express a view?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think I personally don't know the EV for that reason as well. Really depends. I know some people that have fully solar up their home. They have completely be able to offset their demand and charge at home. Then it makes sense. I think EV is all about early adoption now. The ones that are doing it now is paving the way in future when we can actually get to a clean grid, right? We're able to fully maximize it. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. So it's a necessary kind of process of transformation that's beginning now, right? That we need the technology to mature. And I think the incentives are there. It helps, with the subsidies and all that we have in place, that, as we move towards EV, it gives one form of transition, I guess, as we're moving forward. But like I said, there's a long way for the technology to go for it to truly be green from a manufacturing point of view, right? To the consumption, like the grid and all that. So it's not a quick fix. I think like we've touched on, it's not something where overnight, if the entire city moved to EV, right, it's going to be green, right? Just because, I'm sure you've seen this documents or photos where the pollution is now moved somewhere else. It's just not where you're at, right? It makes a cleaner city, but then you got the power plants that are pumping away. So it's not a quick fix. It's something that is a right step in the right direction that will help us to get where we need to over time.
Thank you.
And the cars themselves are not exactly cheap, are they? I mean, there are sort of like more budget options coming through, but I think, let's say in 2022, they were primarily like toys for rich people, right? I mean, they cost even more than BMWs and whatnot. So, how big an impact, if you're targeting the T1, T2 crowd, how big an impact can you really make? And I think it's also worth verbalizing that it's probably even more eco-friendly to not buy a new car and just continue using the existing car that you've got. I mean, part of the consumption is a major issue. If you keep buying new cars all the time, and you keep being made. I think I drive a 15-year-old car, and the first car I got when I got back to Malaysia, and I'm probably going to get buried with it in a Viking funeral when I'm tossed into the ocean in a flaming ball of fire. But I think we've got to think about these things a bit harder, and not just say like, okay, I've done my bit for the environment just because I've bought an EV. It doesn't really work like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so too.
And just wanted to add on, sorry, Renu, because we're back on policy, so we have the right intention. Execution has always been something else. It's just like the hybrid cars. I mean, I know personally a handful of people that bought it because it was cheaper than the equivalent non-hybrid version. You ask them when was the last time they charged it? Probably never, right? They bought it purely because it was cheaper, right? Because of the incentives that are in place. So again, the T1, T2, yes, right? That's where the EVs are and hybrids and all that are being used. Whether it's achieving what is meant to, it's a different question. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think Dr. Yasmin said it the best. Sustainability should not be about buying green stuff. I absolutely agree with you. There is another comment there, and I say it's a comment because we don't actually have experts on, the grid and, can we switch off electricity usage, etc. So, Reviji, I think perhaps the panelists are not really the experts to answer those questions, but I take it as something that I learned today, which is Earth Hour doesn't actually help in terms of GHG or carbon emissions. Before we leave, and it's already 2:35, so slightly over, but before we leave, I did want to ask, in terms of solutions that are out there, and since Melissa is already on the panel as well, right? In terms of solutions that you have seen, whether in Malaysia or outside or in your travels, is there anything that you've seen that has inspired you, or you thought to yourself, wow, that's going to make a big change in our fight towards, achieving this net zero? And if there was, could you share with us what that is? Maybe I'll start with Aaron.
Just because I'm more biased to the whole thermal space, right? I think the most exciting technologies I've seen is zero energy cooling, right? There's a lot of technologies and headways going just because with the whole global warming that's happening now, right? Cooling is really in terms of growth of energy use, cooling is one of the largest just because of the income, where it's increasing a lot of these countries where everybody wants air conditioning for classroom schooling. It is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity, right? Otherwise, students can't learn. And if we don't address that, right, it's a problem. So we've seen a couple of cool technologies from the US that addresses ventilation. I think Faisal mentioned, the biggest energy use increase when everybody opened their windows during COVID with the aircon running. Till today, I still see this happening where people try to air condition a room but leave windows open because of risk of COVID. So a lot of technologies around ventilation, energy recovery on that. How do we have ventilation in spaces without the risk of disease transmission, without increasing final energy use? For me, I feel like this is kind of the practical technologies that could be deployed right away. They could have massive improvements in comfort and also emissions reduction.
Thank you, Aaron. What about you, Faisal? Anything you've seen that has got you saying, wow?
Yeah, I mean, my hobby horse is something called small modular reactors. They're like small little nuclear power plants that can fit in the back of a truck. I find that terribly fascinating. They're a fraction of the size of a nuclear reactor, but the most important thing, you can commission it a lot faster than a traditional nuclear reactor can get, about 300 megawatts, just out of one of those things. There are a few companies that are doing it. There's one called, I think, TerraPower, I think SK from Korea, and the Gates Foundation put some money into it. That looks terribly interesting to me. Especially when you think about, I think the UK is about to declare nuclear as green, right? But unfortunately, we have this stigma because of Chernobyl, happened in Fukushima. But while we were all sleeping during the pandemic, in about a month's time, the supplier of a lot of our foreign labor, Bangladesh, would commission its first nuclear reactor. It'll supply, I think, 15-25% of the country's energy needs, employ thousands of people. And this is a country that supplies us with foreign labor. I think ASEAN-wise, I think Myanmar is going ahead as well with nuclear. So that should be an interesting space to look at. And Malaysia, once upon a time, we were looking at it quite seriously. And, again, I have it on good authority that before Fukushima happened, Tenaga actually sent a bunch of scholars all over the world to become nuclear scientists. But the moment that that accident happened, then it sort of, it became something that nobody wanted to talk about. I think Tun Mahathir said over his dead body, before we see a nuclear power plant in Malaysia, there are concerns on safety and also how to process the waste and things like that. But if you think about our natural advantages in the region, we're out of the ring of fire. We're supposed to be a bit more stable, compared to our neighbors, etc. But again, we're not really sort of like considering it. At least that's what I thought until last week in Parliament, someone forwarded something to me and said that in our 2050 roadmap, we're going to add one small modular reactor, 200 megawatts of capacity by 2050. So, I think it's question number 126 in Parliament. You got to really dig through and see that. That gets me quite excited, I think. And I think people got to sort of like really objectively look at things. If you compare a coal plant, that will kill you very slowly. Anyway, you got to sort of balance that off with nuclear. And, it's all about risk management in the end of the day. And there's no form of energy that, even if you do solar, you're going to require hundreds of acres just to, build one plant. Is that very ESG or not? There's another question there, right? So nuclear is one of those things that we developed back in the, I think, 1930s, 1940s. And then we think that the technology kind of like, stayed static, but we're talking about third generation nuclear reactors. China is looking at some things. Fusion is probably like far off, but these are areas that I Google up every now and then just to see what's happening. Because I think in the end of the day, it's very difficult to make people control their consumption. It's got to be sort of like something where you come up with a technological solution whereby, when we transition from whale oil to petroleum, same thing. We ran out of whales, right? And then the cost of whale oil suddenly like went up, and then people started getting creative. And I think the same thing will happen again, right, with energy sources. So this inflation might be a good thing because it kind of forces people to think ahead and be a bit more, proactive. So end of rant.
I was going to say, now we know what we need to talk about to get Faisal talking.
Yeah.
Last one, and quickly, Melissa, with all the various, I'm sure, technologies and companies that have been submitting to Sunway Net Zero Labs, what have you seen that is really exciting that's coming forward in terms of technologies?
Yeah, I guess that's a very hard question to answer because we see so many different technologies that are very interesting. I mean, a lot of, it's like, Renuka, you understand, right? Like when we see companies pitch, a lot of the ideas and everything are really great. And sometimes a lot of it depends on the ecosystem and the industry and the investment and the implementation. I see a lot of exciting ideas all the time. I mean, even looking at the comments here, right? What I realized is that there are actually so many different ways and problems that we can solve to make this world, a lot better and sustainable, and then hopefully we'll keep this earth very livable for a long time, right? I mean, looking earlier when there was a comment about EV, right? We see technologies such as even those like battery passports or using blockchain to track where the the materials for the battery are are sourced from, to make sure that they are sustainably sourced, for example. So there are so many technology solutions out there, that, if you look at Raven and he mentioned about switching off lights, we see a lot in, like smart meters and things that can control the electricity use, or, how do you regulate electricity use in residential homes and large buildings as well, right? Definitely e-waste recycling. Hi Mo, it's nice to see you here again, right? And I think all of these really, can move the needle. So what excites me actually is that just how much opportunity there is to apply innovation, right? Like there's ones that take a long time, like a long tail, like fission and so on, which may take a while. And even things that are immediate, right? Dr. Yasmin, you were saying, right? Just consumer, the mindset, like what actually we can change, right? So I think what really excites me is, that there is so much room to apply innovation in a way that we as a whole can agree that this is what, the world, Malaysia and the world needs to, to make our climate, to make everything, to just ensure that we still have a world to live in, right? Yeah, so I look forward to hearing more exciting innovations, and I actually look forward to see how I can work with these innovators, right, to really grow and scale, and see how else we can give the feedback to co-design or co-develop these innovations to grow more. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm afraid that is all the time that we have today, and I could actually go on talking for another hour. So primarily just to pick Aaron's brain and Faisal's, to see what else will get him ranting. But we're going to have to say thank you to everyone, and especially Aaron and Faisal for joining us. I think you would have seen also in the comments section that Mo from Earth has also mentioned about batteries, and that will become a big issue when we talk about e-waste and e-waste recycling. Battery technology itself, I think, is going to become very interesting space as we look at renewable energy and how to store that energy. So please, I suppose, give a silent or maybe a round of applause to the speakers today for sharing your time. Thank you, Melissa, for coming and telling us a little bit more about Net Zero Labs. I think with everyone that's here who are in the entrepreneurship space, you can connect with Sunway iLabs, and Afzal has actually put the link there in the chat as well. Thank you. Once again, Aaron and Faisal and Melissa, thank you so much for your time today.